include Progressive Insurance with its Name Your Price tool, a way to see coverage options based on a driver's budget. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville. Engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We are taking a moment today to deal with the debt. This was a special episode about the fight for fair funding at Tennessee State University. And if you haven't listened yet, I highly recommend it. It's in the This Is Nashville podcast feed or at wpln.org/thedebt. This reporting takes us back 60 years to tell the full story of how the only public, historically black university in Tennessee has been systematically underfunded. Even if this is a story you think you know, I promise you will learn something. I did not realize that TSU is one of the only instances in American history where a black and white university merged, and it was really the historically black university that survived. We're going to unpack a bit of this story this hour with the journalists who reported it and leaders at TSU, now and former. And it's also your time to share your experience or ask questions that this radio special raised. Were you a student in the early days of the TSU-UT Nashville merger in the 70s or 80s? What was it like? We'd love to hear from you on air. The number is 615-760-2000. And for the rest of us, what questions does this story about systematic underfunding raise for you? We're also streaming video today at youtube.com/@WPLN. You can leave a comment in the chat there, and we will work that into the conversation. So to start us off, Camelia Burris and Emily Siner, who co-reported the story, welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that you made 60 years of legal fights, settlements, and protests so interesting. There are even many laughs along the way somehow. So, Camelia, why did you all feel the need to tell this story right now?
Well, I wanted to tell this story because I'm a rare Nashville native, a unicorn as people call it, and I grew up down the street from TSU, so I'm really invested in what happens to the school. But right now, there's a lot of conversations about race in higher education. And with the rolling back of DEI practices and affirmative action, I think that a lot of people in power believe that whatever debt is owed to marginalized people who have been wronged in the past has been paid. So with this story, we're looking into the chronic underfunding of HBCUs and how it impacts not just Black people, but the state as a whole and what they're losing out on by not investing in those students.
And I guess with DEI, so much of that is more like this societal debt, hard to put your finger on something precise. But in this case, you're really trying to come up with an actual dollar figure because there are receipts here. So, Emily, how much does the state owe TSU?
Well, the official number that many people have been talking about in recent years that came out of a legislative report in 2021 is $544 million. That's the number that's been thrown around a lot. But that really just looks at one very small slice of TSU's funding. It's what the state is supposed to fund agriculture-related programs at TSU, land grant programs at TSU, which you can imagine that's not most of the operations of the university. So what we quickly realized as we started to look into this is that there's so much more that we don't even know about. And we talked to many people who kind of had ideas of other slices of funding that have also been underfunded but have never been calculated.
Yeah. And we'll get more into calculating that debt later in the program. But I guess one of the questions that rose to me in listening to this, because yes, if you listened to yesterday's show and you heard me on it barely, that's because I barely had anything to do with this reporting. This really was Emily and Camelia's work. I guess a question that I was left with is, does anyone contest that the state of Tennessee did fail to match that money and while they were matching the same money for our other land-grant university, University of Tennessee?
Officially, no. The $544 million came from a bipartisan committee that put out this report in 2021. I think there are people who I've heard some lawmakers expressed some doubt about it, but that it's never been like an official thing. Generally, the governor, the head of the legislature, like they all seem to be on board with that. I've also heard some people who on the other side say, this actually is less than what we're owed. It doesn't even account for inflation over the years. So actually, we've been doing some, along the way, you have to make some assumptions and calculations and make some guesses. And so some people are like, well, it's probably way more.
Well, among other things that I learned just by being a listener to this radio special was about these, I guess we call them segregation scholarships, where the state basically pulled money out of TSU's appropriation if a black student wanted a graduate degree that TSU didn't offer, sent them out of state and paid tuition elsewhere. If I have that right, Camelia, do we have any idea how much was pulled from TSU over the years?
Well, we spoke to Dr. Crystal Sanders, who's a professor at Emory University, and she was talking about, I believe it was in the billions of dollars that it was. So it's a lot of money. So that's what Emily was mentioning as far as calculating the debt. And that's one thing that we just learned about. I had never heard of this. I think a lot of people haven't. So who knows what other debts are out there.
And was that unique to TSU, or were other states doing such a thing?
Yes, other southern states were doing that as well.
Wow. And it was about sending students not to the other state universities, but sending them out of state.
Right, and most of the HBCUs didn't have graduate programs, so you couldn't go to those schools. So they didn't want you to go to UT Knoxville either, so they would send you up north or somewhere else to go to school and take money out of TSU's budget.
Wow. And Emily, has there been any recognition that it was improper to do this?
No. I mean, Dr. Crystal Sanders at Emory has written an entire book about it, and it's an amazing book. I think she's gotten some amount of press within the legal history community, but it hasn't, as far as I know, risen to the attention of kind of greater public knowledge of it, which is part of why we wanted to talk about it. And another interesting thing about it is that every southern state would do this practice, but not all of them took the money from their Black university to send the students out of state. Some of them found other money, which also made wasn't great, but Tennessee was like actually taking the money from TSU's budget to send students out of state because they couldn't go to UT.
Well, to our listeners, were you aware of these debts, as we're calling them? Are you any more convinced that this is a debt the state of Tennessee owes TSU? Did you or a family member receive one of these so-called segregation scholarships in the 40s and 50s? Did you understand where the money was coming from? We welcome your call throughout the hour at 615-760-2000. And you can also put a comment in the chat at our video stream from the studio here. That's at youtube.com/@WPLN. All right, helping us answer your questions, bring a little more context to the experiences are George Pruitt, a retired president from Thomas Edison State University, not just a president, served 35 years at Thomas Edison, former vice president of student affairs at TSU back before I was born, during the critical years we're talking about. Also author of From Protest to President. George Pruitt, welcome to This is Nashville.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And friend of the show, TSU professor and historian, Dr. Learotha Williams. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for the invitation to come back.
Well, Dr. Lee, how much awareness is there on campus about this underfunding we're talking about?
Our students are acutely aware of what's going on because it was a big story here for a couple of years. I don't know if you ever driven off I-40 onto 28th Avenue North.
Many days I do, yes, to get here in Metro Center.
There was a big banner there at the intersection that said $2.1 billion. So our students are aware of the conversations. Full disclosure, in all of my African-American history classes, we spend a certain number of days talking about the Geyer case and the debt. And we've spent some time looking at Dr. Sanders' book on segregation scholarships this semester. So they are very aware of it. And oftentimes in class, the students are like, what are we going to do to get our money? You know, I have a lot of ideas. So I'm a professor, so we have ideas. But I suggest to them that they're going to have to be the ones that make the most noise for things to happen.
Well, you mentioned the Geyer case. Dr. Pruitt, you were head of student affairs during some of those critical early years of the Geyer case, which was, another thing I learned, the longest-running desegregation lawsuit in higher education. Lasted from 1968 to 2006. How come that settlement didn't resolve these funding issues that we're still talking about this week?
I'm not really sure. That was really not part of the litigation. Those that have come before me have said and documented the historic underfunding from the day Tennessee State opened its doors. It was never funded or even expected to be funded or never viewed as a peer institution of the other institutions in the state. So that was not really a part of the litigation. The part of the litigation was about the future, about whether the state was going to continue a dual system of higher education, separate and unequal, or whether it was going to respond to the spirit of the Brown case and not have a dual system of higher education. And that was really the crux of what the lawsuit was about.
Yeah. Well, so how did that settlement color the work that you were doing on campus? What did it require you to do?
Well, the settlement itself, I mean, there's two phases of that. There was the political struggle that led up to the court case of the settlement. And then there was the legal struggle that resulted in the outcome. And then there was the process of actually merging the institutions, or really, it really wasn't a merger. It was an acquisition. The way the case was written and the intent of the case was that Tennessee State acquire the University of Tennessee at Nashville and become one institution. So there were three very separate, distinct phases. The easiest of the phases, although, as you might have guessed, it was complicated, but the easiest phase was the merger phase, the actual acquisition and consolidation of the two schools. That was a fairly significant management challenge, but we knew how to do that, and we did it very well. The more difficult and complicated parts were the two aspects that led up to it, the actual court case and the political dynamics that it spurred, and the political environment that surrounded all of that.
Well, if this is to listeners now, if you attended TSU, what effects did you see from the Geyer case, or more broadly, what have you seen because of the underfunding, the effects on this campus, our public university in Nashville? We're taking your calls throughout the hour at 615-760-2000. I may now go to our phones, take our first call. This is Gray in Nashville. You're on the show talking about the debt. What you got?
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for taking my phone call. Your ladies on your show did a great job yesterday. I listened to the recorded version of the dead, and I just want to commend them for the job that they did. I also am thrilled to hear that you have Dr. Pruitt on your show with you. He won't remember me, but I was a child when he worked at TSU. My comment was about the opportunity cost that TSU has suffered for not having their own home stadium for the last 2 decades at least, a consistent home game strategy where most of the games now are outsourced. We've been taken out of a conference, which I believe was the MEAC at one time. And I've asked people to think about, can you imagine the University of Tennessee, MTSU, the University of Alabama, and a lot of these notable schools with great histories, great football programs without having their home stadium. And as a child growing up at TSU, I remembered the pageantry and the soul and the economics generated not only on the campus itself, but in the surrounding areas. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Dr. Pruitt, you can correct me, I think TSU's Hale Stadium might hold about 10,000 people. So if you figure 10,000 people in the hole and maybe another 3,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 people outside, the tailgaters, the people walking up and down the streets, you're probably looking at about $2 to $3 million per home game. And that's just me off the top of my head comparing something like FAMU, which you ladies did a great job. Your ladies yesterday did a great job talking about Dr. Humphreys and his contributions and how he had to deal with the discrepancies. And I also, with that, I'm sorry, I won't hold you, but not only the opportunity cost from not having it stated for so many years, there's also the issue of certain programs, to my knowledge, that were actually taken away from TSU, specifically the aviation program, aviation program that they, I think, gave a lot of that to MTSU. I hear part of the agriculture department was splintered off. So not only are we missing monies that were due to us, there's also the extraction of monies that were dedicated to certain departments. So the main thing, and I'll close here, Blake, I apologize for being long-winded, but my main concern actually is how what your ladies described yesterday as the siphoning of the soul of the university, and the football program having its own home stadium has a lot to do with the soul of TSU because of its programming with the great notable coaches that we've had throughout the years. It has really suffered as a result of that, and now people like myself don't like going to Nissan Stadium because of the treatment that I've received going there, but also it's just not the same. So that's my comment. I apologize for being so long-winded.
Gray, thank you for the call and for the compliments on the reporting. And Dr. Pruitt, I'll let you chime in, then we may have to take our first break. But, as Gray was saying, the home games for TSU are now played at Titan Stadium, although I feel like I recall one or two that may have been played at the Hole in the last few years. But were they still playing home games on campus when you were head of student affairs?
Yes, we were, and Gray is right. And that wasn't an accident. That was done with malice.
Oh, really?
It absolutely was done with malice. There was a long history and tradition of athletic support from Tennesseans of all races for that wonderful athletic program. He mentioned Florida A&M. We never knew how many people would come to that game because we sold out every facility we could find. We played University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and we had 50,000 Tennessee State University tickets sold in Las Vegas. And that athletic program and support in that community on that campus was an enormous part of the culture. But it was also a strong part of the political support that we enjoyed. And so taking that football schedule away, destroying the historic rivalries that Tennessee State had, and putting it in a conference where that was done on purpose to break the continuity between that cultural past and to weaken the school for the future going forward.
Wow.
It was not a good thing, and the university has suffered from that ever since. You talk about tangible consequences of the underfunding. When I was at Tennessee State in the middle of the worst winter in the history of Nashville at the time, our boilers went out and we lost heat to the campus. That was because the request that we had been making for years to update the boiler to replace obsolete parts was being turned down and underfunded by the state. So when that boiler collapsed and we lost heat, there were allegations it was because we were incompetent. They ignored the fact that they had purposefully not funded it, and that was well documented. The largest residence hall we had on the campus, when that dormitory opened, they had to cut the furniture to get it in the doors because the doors weren't big enough to put the furniture in the building. So you could go on and on and on and on and on and document the history of underfunding and the consequences to the campus. But it was also done, things happened after the merger were to like taking the school out of the stadium, changing the football schedule to unhook the university from those rivalries that brought in funding, money, and political support. That was not done by accident.
Well, you make strong points there that we're going to get back to, but we do need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll also talk about technically tallying this debt we're talking about to TSU. Is it $500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion? The math is complicated. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, helping donors make more possible during the season of giving. More at cfmt.org. and the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Vanderbilt University, offering intellectual courses for adults over 50. Registration for winter courses open now at vanderbilt.edu/OLLI.
Did you know, in addition to the service we provide on 90.3 FM WPLN, Nashville's local news and NPR station, we also offer classical music on HD radio? Next time you're in the car, tune to 90.3 FM, and when the HD symbol comes on, select HD2. And when you're at home, ask your smart speaker to play Nashville Classical. More about Nashville Public Radio's multiple audio services, including schedules and ways to listen at WPLN.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We're calculating the debt owed to Tennessee State University. The Debt is a radio special reported in partnership with the Tennessee Lookout by Emily Siner and Camelia Burris. It's an hour that will enlighten and for some potentially enrage with some laughs along the way. It's really about as good as audio journalism gets, so I hope you take the time to enjoy it. Emily, you said your goal was to actually calculate the debt, like technically calculate it. Why was that so hard?
Yeah, I like math. I was like, this is a challenge I could do. And then I realized that in order to do it for any particular slice of funding, you need to first find the records, which are often not in one place. Representative Harold Love told us about how he was piecing together records from the legislative library and the archives. There's records from the federal government that he couldn't even obtain.
From his own father.
So you have to know where the records are, and then you have to be able to read these like really antiquated budgets and to be able to say definitively, this is a line item that should have gone to TSU that actually went to UT. So I just decided that it was more important to talk about how we got here and explain the numbers that have come up with and kind of raise the questions of what else there could be.
Yeah. Well, still with us are historian Lee Williams and retired administrator Dr. George Pruitt. Dr. Pruitt, there's this idea that historically black institutions are asked to do more with less. What did that look like at TSU?
Well, it took a lot of forms. Tennessee had one of the most complicated, and I must say, really good funding formulas. And it was done through a series of algorithms and math to calculate what the institutions would receive. But the formula did not take into account the different admission. Even though Tennessee State was not one of the larger public institutions, we had the largest percentage of our students of financial aid than any of the institutions. So we had the overhead burden of a huge financial aid office, the data processing support required, the burdens in the accounting area to manage this huge financial aid program. That was never accounted or recognized in the formula, so that came out of our hide. So even though the formula, at least in a prima facie basis, was designed to be equitable, to provide equitable funding, because there was no consideration of the different cost structure of a place like Tennessee State, we got underfunded. It was just done systematically, and it was a byproduct of the formula funding. I don't think there was any malice in that. I just think it was a process, and there was just not. And it was a refusal to recognize that the cost structure of that institution was different.
Yeah,
and I'm not talking about things like remediation. I'm talking about things that just were a function of the demographics and the economic condition of our students.
Yeah, well, and even to this day, I think this morning, as we're prepping for this show, the comptroller's office puts out a new, audited financial report for the university. The issues, a lot of them, are with that very office you're talking about. So it exists to this day. Dr. Lee, what does doing more with less still look like on TSU's campus?
Well, there's the expectation that our students achieve just as much as students at MTSU or UT. But quite frankly, we're not given the resources necessary to make that happen. Mm-hmm. I guess a useful metaphor would be sort of like, you're going to feed your two children and you give one child 3 full-course meals every day, but the other child you're feeding bread and water. And then you look at the child that's just getting the most basic thing they need to survive and saying, okay, how come you don't have as much energy as this child? How come you are suffering from all of these health issues as opposed to this child? So you're feeding one more, and economically, I mean in money, and expecting somebody that's not getting as much money to do just as well. And then you're blaming them when they stumble.
You know, that analogy is pretty powerful. But it suggests again that it's intentional starving. Is that complicated to bring up on campus in certain rooms?
It's difficult to talk about these days or to hear if you don't want to recognize the truth. When TSU was established, we can look at the evidence, and the evidence suggests that the state of Tennessee didn't appreciate a certain group of students as opposed to another group. And it's no accident that those students were Black. As the 20th century progresses, you see the same sort of thing. We know that TSU is recognized as a land-grant college, but the state isn't behaving that way. And the tendency is oftentimes to blame Black leadership. You know, you can't trust Black leaders. They are untrustworthy. They are venal. They spend their money on, you know, just things that they don't need to be spending money on. But that's an old record. That's something that we've been hearing since Reconstruction. And it's sad that we see the same thing happening today. So I guess, Blake, if your question was, is it intentional? I'll say look at the historical record and look at it with open eyes, and you can reach your own conclusion on that.
Even if the individuals might sort of deny that it's intentional, I guess it's the intention of the state when you take it collectively. Right,
because even with the documents, with the books that Representative Love brought forward when he made his case for the $500 million. Those numbers are in the books, and it said that it should have been paid to TSU, but it was not. And then when the question's posed as to, well, why wasn't it paid, you know, you get shoulder shrugs. For those of us who pay close attention to history, we understand what those shrugs mean, what they represent.
And I think what also bolsters that is if you just look at the basic calculation of how much the state is spending on its public universities per student, which is what the Biden administration calculated a few years ago, and they came out with a figure that was $2.1 billion. They were just looking at how much has the state spent on UT students compared to TSU students. And the state is, funding less per student at TSU than UT. And it's hard because there's nothing legally wrong with that. The government can decide to fund one university more than the other. But I think that feels deeply unfair to people on campus and objectively just shows that the state values its land-grant university in Knoxville more than it values its land-grant university in Nashville.
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville, and we're taking your calls this hour. If you'd like to join us on air, the number is 615-760-2000. We'd love to hear from you if you've been a TSU student, if you have worked on campus. We want to hear your reflections. We're also streaming video today at youtube.com/@WPLN. You can leave a comment in the chat or just give a shout out to the guest today. We'll work that in on the air. Camellia, Emily referenced this number that came from the Biden administration, $2 billion that was underfunded to TSU. The difference between the funding numbers, I guess might even be causing some confusion, fracturing the movement to get something repaid. Why is Representative Harold Love not using $2 billion as the number that he wants the state to pay?
Well, he's focused on the state matching the land-grant money, and he thinks that the $2 billion is causing a distraction, as you mentioned, and people are getting them confused because, as Emily mentioned, there are two different calculations. They're not based on the same formula. So he wants us to just focus on the land grant money first and getting that taken care of.
And I guess when you start using the B word, it starts to say, oh, that's far too great.
Yeah. I don't know if he thinks it's realistic.
Right. Well, Dr. Pruitt, state funding is clearly essential. But I wonder what you might have to say about private funding. I was looking at the University of Tennessee, which put out a press release last year. They took in more than $400 million in private donations just last year, $428 million to be exact. What role could philanthropy play in also resolving the shortchanging of TSU from the government?
Well, they're related. The state funding and the state support, in even ways that go beyond funding, they all result in the strength and character of the institution. And that strength and character and quality attracts private giving, because people do not want to invest in institutions that are struggling and having difficulty. People want to invest in institutions that are strong and viable and progressing. And over the years, Tennessee State has in fact attracted significant financial resources. But I want to make one statement. I want to follow up briefly on one of the comments that was made. And that is the stewardship of resources issue. We in the past have been systematically attacked for that when we weren't given the resources to manage the place, and there were problems. But it would be less than honest to not to acknowledge that there have been lapses in the stewardship of the resources, and when that has happened, that the fact of that matter has been used to be generalized to undermine the ability of the capacity of the institution to handle the money that it deserves. And that's not fair. You have lapses in the stewardship, the management of funding at pretty much every school in the state. Over time, if you go back time enough, you can find it. But we need to be acknowledged. When that happens, we need to acknowledge it. Yes, that wasn't done well, and the management and the leadership could have done a better job than that. And yes, the issues we have of underfunding doesn't excuse that. But those individuals should be held accountable for that. You move on, but that shouldn't be used as a baseline for basically saying that the institution doesn't have the capacity to manage the resources, so that we shouldn't give it to them. That's just a false model. I think Representative Love is doing the right thing. He's dealing with things that are objective, quantifiable, and unambiguous. So we get away from the broader question about whether it's deserved or not. There is no question that money is owed the institution. And it's objective, it's math, it's not philosophy. So I think focusing on what you can document and explain and not argue about, and which there's consensus about, is both the right thing to do. It's also smart political strategy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pruitt. To listeners, what do you envision for TSU if it's properly funded? What would it take for the state to decide to do such a thing? Join us on air at 615-760-2000 with your thoughts. We'll go to the phones now. Candace in Nashville, you're on This is Nashville, talking about the debt.
Hey, good evening. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
This is actually a story I've always actually been low-key interested in, because my aunt was actually an alumni of Tennessee State during this time. And I always had the burning question, what would make UT Nashville think that they could acquire Tennessee State University, which was and continues to be a land grant institute, as evidenced by the Morrell Act, which is the second Morrell Act that was established right here in the United States.
Hey, Candace, let us deal with that question and just hang on the line here for a second. Was UT Nashville trying to take over TSU? Do we know here in the room?
Dr. Pruitt would know.
Dr. Pruitt, go ahead.
No, it really wasn't coming from the University of Tennessee at Nashville. It was a much broader plan. There was a statewide desegregation plan that was adopted after the court case was filed to defend this quote separate but equal concept. And if you read it, it basically capped Tennessee State's enrollment at about 4,000 students. It had limited the programs that Tennessee State could offer. It was pretty clear from the document, and it's available, should be available somewhere. Go read it. It's pretty clear that the longer view of the state was to strangle Tennessee State University, invest resources into the University of Tennessee at Nashville, and at some point, there would be a critical mass by which Tennessee State would no longer be viable. University of Tennessee at Nashville would be a strong, burgeoning, vigorous institution, and Tennessee State would either go away or be folded and would become a part of UT Nashville. But it wasn't coming from UT Nashville. This was coming from a broader view of higher education planning by the state.
I see. Well, Candace, I hope that answers your question. What's your other inquiry?
My inquiry was if Tennessee State University were to receive the money that they are owed, the numbers, I still believe they are owed more money, even if you do add the inflation on. If you're the president of Tennessee State, where do you put these monies? Do you put this money into facilities? Do you put this into capital? Where do you put the money first?
Well, thank you for the question, Candace. And it's a question I've got, too. Emily, is there discussion about what to do with money, where it to become available?
Well, so after the report came out about the $544 million, the legislature allocated $250 million within the first couple of years. That was restricted to capital expenses, so things like buildings and facilities.
And there's construction going on campus right now. Is that related?
I believe so.
Okay.
And Harold Love worked really hard in this past legislative session to free up some of that money to be used for operations, kind of an acknowledgement that the underfunding in one area meant that money was taken out of operations to pay for it. I haven't heard much discussion since then about what additional money coming in would be used for. I imagine those conversations are taking place on campus. I get the sense that the administration now is kind of trying to wait and see in this current political moment how much clout they have to be able to come forward with a proposal and really ask for the remaining money.
Dr. Lee, are there dreams about how one would use a lump sum or a big influx of money?
I have a lot of ideas.
Well, you've got the mic.
I think infrastructure first and foremost, because I don't know if y'all remember a couple of years ago, a lightning strike took out all of the power on campus for a while. And then there was a tornado, and I can remember a boiler going out. And that's all in short order. And, those buildings outside of the classrooms, those buildings, those dormitories, residence halls, those are the things that the students interact with every day. So if they're in a dorm and they got mold growing there, first thing they're going to leave and they're going to tell other folks not to come. When visitors come to campus, we bring them to our best buildings first and foremost.
Like you do.
Attract them. So infrastructure, I think, would be the first thing, the residence halls and the classroom, the spaces where learning take place.
Well, we need to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the vision for the future. What does a fully funded TSU look like? What could it be? What will it take besides dollars? Join us on air, 615-760-2000. Robert, thanks for hanging on the line. We'll get to you straight away when we come back. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Artisan Build Construct, offering a collaborative full-service approach to residential and commercial construction, specializing in historic home remodeling throughout Middle Tennessee. Learn more at artisanbuildconstruct.com. And Rogers, Shea, and Spanos, local attorneys helping families navigate the complex and high-conflict issues of divorce, custody, alimony, and mediation for over 40 years. More at midtnlawyers.com. And Ryman Auditorium, announcing an evening with Robert Plant and Saving Grace, March 26th. Plant is bringing folk and gospel influences to a shared project with vocalist Susie Diane and the band. More at Ryman.com.
Spanish National Police have arrested 3 members of a white supremacist group called The Base. It is internationally known as a terrorist organization.
The cell specifically had promoted and encouraged acts of violence. They were actually allegedly planning acts themselves.
The origins of the group and how it worked on the inside, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 2 on 90.3 WPLN News.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We're closing out The Debt, a special reporting project with the Tennessee Lookout, looking at decades of underfunding of Tennessee State University, our public university system's only historically black institution. It is a fascinating tale told over the course of an hour. You can find it in our podcast feed or at wpln.org/thedebt. Reporters Emily Siner and Camelia Burris have been with us through the hour to take your questions, field your comments, along with Dr. George Pruitt joining us remotely, and with Dr. Lee Williams, who's sitting right in front of me here. Join the conversation at 615-760-2000. What does a fully funded TSU look like? What are your hopes and dreams for Nashville's land-grant university? You can also chime in at the video stream. There's a chat there. Go ahead and light that up if you want. YouTube.com/@WPLN. Robert, you've been waiting patiently there to make your comment. Thanks for tuning in. What's your comment on the debt?
Sir, my comment on the debt is that I went to school out there between 73 and 76. And at that time, a lot of 5A athletes were going there. Number 1 picks in the NFL draft. But I'm just saying we had a number 4 pick in the 1981 and 82 baseball draft.
Baseball. Is there a baseball team at TSU now?
That's what I was talking about.
Oh.
We had a baseball team since 1993. But Terry Blocker was the number 4 pick by the Cubs in the draft. So I'm saying the defunding has fueled with Title IX, non-revenue sports, and, we have a softball team. Every public college in Tennessee, all the major black colleges around the country, all of them have a baseball team.
Yeah.
I mean, like the football team, like the guy was talking about earlier, where we don't use the whole no more as far as for home football games.
Well, it's used for a couple of football games each year, I think, right?
Yeah.
Not this year, I don't think.
Okay.
But maybe last year, maybe a year before that. But the thing about what Dr. Lee was saying is that the infrastructure does need to be upgraded. It has to be upgraded with the money that was not, funded by the state and the matching grants, and it's a lot of things that's going on, because you have students there who come that are, they're nerds. They want to learn.
Did you say they're nerds? Just wanted to make sure. Robert, go ahead.
No, but I'm just saying, we got to fuel the nerds, though. We can't just, we got to have the best of the best.
Yeah.
To come here just to, to get the quality of education you need. You got a quality staff members. You got a lot of things going on. So it's just that hopefully we will be able in the future just to, bring a lot of old things back. And bring in a whole lot of new things.
Robert,
you know what I mean?
Thank you for this call. We're actually getting a lot of calls, and so Dr. Pruitt, I may have you respond quickly since you were there in those days. How important was baseball?
Well, all of that. One of the things that's important. One of the things and I have, because of personal things that I don't need to go into because it takes too much time. I have had personal contact with the leadership of Tennessee State, from President Hale's days when it was founded, through President Davis, who built it, to President Humphreys, who saved it. And one of the hallmarks of that institution is that they made a statement that access and excellence are not mutually exclusive. And the notion that to have access, you have to compromise on excellence. That university made a statement over most of its history that that's a lie and that's not true. Yes, Tennessee State's athletics is legendary. If you look at the Tiger Bells and the women's track team, Tennessee State has more Olympic gold medals than many countries in the United States. But it's also produced extraordinary scholars. I'm going to give a plug for the Levi Watkins Institute there. Levi Watkins graduated from Tennessee State in 1966. He integrated Vanderbilt's medical school. He went on to Harvard and Johns Hopkins. He created and performed the first implant of an implantable defibrillator at Johns Hopkins, and the outpatient clinic at Johns Hopkins University, who many people consider to be the finest medical school in the country, is the Levi Watkins Outpatient Center. So I want going forward in the future, there needs to be a return and recognition that excellence and access can be the same thing if it's done right. And that ought to be the future mode for Tennessee State.
Well,
that ought to be the centerpeace for that. And I'm going to shut up now because I'll talk too much.
No, you've talked just right. We're going to take some calls so we can make sure we get everybody on this hour. Dean in Nashville, what you got?
Hey, I am the sous chef there at TSU. Huh. And I heard somebody making a comment about the infrastructure and how the housing and those kind of things might need some support. I just have to say the kitchen doesn't need the help. We get so much encouragement. We get inspected weekly to make sure that we keep the highest standards. And I just have to give credit to the people that are running the place right now, because they're making sure that the students are being fed safely and correctly.
All right, that straight from the mouth of the executive sous chef at TSU. Dean, thanks for the call. Are you eating in the cafeteria much there, Dr. Lee?
Only on fried chicken Wednesdays.
All right, well, so maybe next week.
I think that's a universal thing at HBCUs. We had fried chicken Wednesdays at Spelman College also.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's
Fried Chicken Wednesday. We're going to have to check it out just down the street here. We're in Metro Center, so, not far away at all. Kim in Nashville, let's bring you in here. What do you have to say about the debt?
Good afternoon. So I'm involved with the local 4-H that works out of TSU. And we did a fun Saturday in April, and we did burritos out at the greenhouse, and off the greenhouse on campus.
Uh-oh, Kim, you're breaking up a little bit, but yeah, go ahead.
She taught us some things about habanero peppers in her research, and I think that this is fantastic because of the community partnerships with the 4-H. And Professor Zima talked about her research in helping local farms maximize their land use. So
yeah.
I've only been in this community for a year, and I'm so glad for the partnerships that I've been able to work with.
Well, thanks for your call, Kim. And I know it's not your wheelhouse, Dr. Lee, but I mean, it seems like agriculture is a way that draws people onto campus just because it's very, there's a lot of land used for it over here.
And we have community gardens there as well. So if you have a green thumb, you can go there and plant tomatoes or greens or whatever. And that speaks, I think, to the sort of historic, intimate relationship that TSU has had with the community. When we think of the African-American community in this city, there are two very strong institutions. That's the church and TSU or Fisk, right? And not everybody goes to church, but we are very much invested in our universities. So,
let's work in one more call before the end of the hour. Terry in Nashville, talk to us about the debt.
Oh, yeah, the debt. I served on the Tennessee State University Foundation through 4 presidents. I'm a 1980 graduate of Tennessee State University, and I've gone to 3 HBCUs, Tennessee State, Southern University, and Howard University School of Law.
Wow.
And that Tennessee State, comparing those 3 institutions, that have been lacking in the funding and support for TSU. And that TSU in 1978, we had to march on the legislature to get funding to improve our heat and our hot water.
Were you part of that march?
Yes, I was part of that march, helped organize it. And that we were without, and I told the president of TSU Alumni Association or undergraduates said, look, don't march on the president's house. Let's march to the legislature since they were in session. And they did appropriate some money to upgrade our facilities at that time. But in terms of the last, I was on the foundation, and I encouraged, Mr. Tucker, to not just go after, what money that just can keep us stable. We need to have money that's going to be able to fund us in the future. We need to go. The legislature needs to seriously look at Tennessee State, go out there and take a tour on the campus, assess what our needs are, and prioritize them, and appropriate the necessary funds in order to pay for those to upgrade our facilities. And I want to mention this: most people are not aware of this. Tennessee State, MTSU, and Memphis State, or Memphis University, Memphis now, were all created in the same legislative session. And why we fell behind because we were not funded equally with those other institutions. So we got a lot of catching up to do. So there's no sense in us saying we're going to not look at that $2.2 billion that was not appropriated to Tennessee State. It needs to be given to us like yesterday, so that we can compete with the rest of the universities in this state.
Yeah. Terry, thank you for did you have a question, Emily?
Well, I just wanted to say I didn't know about the 1978 student protest, but one of the things that we covered was a 1990 student protest that actually turned into a hunger strike in downtown Nashville. And I think what we were kind of tracing over the course of this history is that it's taken people in all different positions, people in the courtroom, legislators, administrators, and students to demand money. And I think there was like a very long tradition of students being part of that too.
Well, Dr. Lee, we may land the hour on you. Is there appetite, energy for making such a show that would be needed to get this funding issue resolved?
I think among the people that I see every day, the students, there is, because when we talk about these subjects in class, one of the questions that I'm always asked is, well, what can we do? And of course, my first response is study the history, know what has happened, learned that you came from a history of, you have a legacy of protest, and now it's time for you to participate. Because no significant change has come unless the students have made noise.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who called in to join the conversation this hour, and also thank you to our guest, to Dr. George Pruitt, joining us, a former administrator at TSU, and then longtime president of Thomas Edison, and Dr. Lee Williams, historian, professor at TSU, and of course, Camelia Burris, our education reporter, and Emily Siner. She is many things, including the co-reporter of The Debt. So I hope you've enjoyed The Debt. It's available in our podcast feed or at WPLN.org/The Debt. And you'll hear additional reporting next week during Morning Edition on the air. Thanks for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville, is a production of Nashville Public Radio. If you miss an episode, you can always find it in our feed or just ask a smart speaker to play the latest episode. Today's episode produced by Camelia Burris, directed by Tasha A.F. Limley. Josh Deepen is working the phones, and our board operator today is Mary Mancini, first-timer, and it went okay. Masterminds behind that theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to our reporting partner, the Tennessee Lookout. You can always find us on the socials at This Is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
I think people believe that in small towns, people will just accept chump change or crumbs.
If you want to end homelessness, this is not the way to do it.
If things don't change and we don't stand up and say, like, we're not okay with this isn't the country that we want to be, I'm worried that it'll just continue to progress in that way and get worse.
Here in Nashville, people care about their work, their community, their state. I'm Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams. I cover